Commander Li Wu stared at the flickering hologram with wide eyes. The blue light from the display cast strange shadows across his face as he watched Admiral Park Ji-ho deliver the worst news in human history. Around the table, Earth's top military leaders sat frozen in their chairs. "Say that again, General Han?" Suik whispered, his voice barely audible. Admiral Park's weathered face looked older than ever through the static-filled transmission. "The Galactic Coalition has surrendered too. The Void Dominion. Every species, every world, every fleet. We voted to give up." Captain Kim Do-yoon felt her stomach drop. She had fought in 3 border wars and faced death countless times, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. "How long do we have?" 72 hours, Park replied. "All military forces must power down their weapons. All civilians must report to processing centers. The machines will come for integration." Lieutenant Colonel Choi Min-ho stood up slowly from his seat at the back of the room. His hands were shaking, but his voice remained steady.
"What happens if we say no?"
The transmission crackled with interference. Behind Admiral Park, the lights of the Coalition headquarters began to dim as massive, dark shapes moved across the sky. The shadow ships were already there. "The Kethver Empire tried to fight," Park said quietly. "They had the strongest military in the galaxy. Plasma cannons that could crack moons, shields that could stop solar flares. The Dominion destroyed them in 6 hours." Minister Yoon Hae-jin clutched her tablet with white knuckles. "What about the Synthesis Collective? They had technology we could barely understand." 2 hours, Park answered. "The perfect computer minds calculated every possible strategy. None of it mattered. The machines learned faster than they could adapt." The room fell silent, except for the hum of the air recyclers. Commander Li Wu looked around at his colleagues. These were the toughest people he knew. Men and women who had dedicated their lives to protecting Earth. Now, they sat like children who had just learned monsters were real. "How many are dead?" asked Captain Kim Do-yoon. 12 billion in the Vega system alone. "The machines don't kill. They process. They take your mind, your memories, everything that makes you who you are. Then they add it to their collective. Your body becomes another drone." General Han Seok's fist hit the table so hard that coffee cups jumped. "This is insane. We can't just roll over and die." Minister Yoon stood up, her diplomatic training taking over. "General, please think clearly. We're talking about 8 billion human lives. Every man, woman, and child on Earth. Do we have the right to doom them all? We have the right to hand them over to those machines?" Han shot back. "Least, if we fight, we die as humans." Lieutenant Colonel Choi walked to the front of the room. Everyone turned to look at him. He was younger than most of the others, but his quiet strength had always commanded respect. "My grandmother was in Seoul when the invaders came," he said. Softly, she was just a teenager then, but she joined the resistance. She told me stories about hiding in the mountains, about fighting with whatever they could find. Rocks, kitchen knives, farming tools. He paused and looked directly at General Han. "She used to say that some things matter more than living. Said freedom isn't something you can trade away, not even to save your life." Minister Yoon shook her head. "That was different. Those were human enemies. This is something beyond our understanding. Look what happened to the Kethver. Look what happened to every species that tried to resist." Commander Li Wu finally found his voice. "Maybe that's exactly why we have to try." Everyone turned to stare at him. He had been quiet through the entire meeting, just listening and thinking. About it, he continued. Every species in the galaxy made the same choice. They all decided that survival was more important than freedom. They all chose to become slaves rather than die as free beings. Admiral Park's image flickered again. The transmission was getting weaker as more Dominion ships moved into position around the Coalition headquarters. "Earth, you need to understand," Park said urgently. "This isn't about courage or honor anymore. The Dominion has conquered 90% of known space. They have ships the size of moons, weapons that can destroy stars. What can one small planet do against that?" General Han stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see the lights of the city, millions of people going about their evening routines. They had no idea that in 3 days everything they knew might end. Maybe nothing.
he admitted. Maybe we'll die just as fast as everyone else, but at least we'll die trying. The transmission from Admiral Park began to break up completely. His voice came through in fragments. Earth, ... Final warning, they're coming. God help, ... all. The hologram went dark. The room sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Minister Yoon spoke. We need to vote. All in favor of accepting the Dominion's terms. Her hand stayed down. No one else moved? All in favor of resistance? Every hand in the room went up. General Han looked around at his colleagues and smiled grimly. Well then, I guess Earth goes to war. The message went out on every radio wave, every satellite link, every communication channel humanity could reach. President Nam Tae-sung's voice was calm and clear as it traveled across the galaxy. This is Earth. We have heard your terms. Our answer is no. Captain Kim Da-yoon listened to the broadcast while standing on the bridge of what used to be a simple cargo ship. The Soul's Pride had carried rice and electronics between Earth and Mars for 15 years. Now her crew was bolting missile launchers to her hull. Captain, are we really doing this? Asked Pilot Officer Lee Sora. She was trying. To connect a military targeting system to controls meant for loading cargo containers. Sparks flew from the wiring as she worked. Looks that way, Kim replied, watching her engineer struggle with power cables that were never meant to carry this much energy. Engineering. Shbei Dongjun wiped sweat from his forehead. My daughter asks me every night when the bad machines are coming. I told her Daddy would keep them away. He looked up at his captain. I meant it. All around Earth's moon, the same scene was playing out. The Luna shipyards had never been so busy. Workers who built passenger shuttles were now installing weapons on anything that could fly. Mining ships got new armor plating. Luxury cruise vessels had their swimming pools replaced with missile pods. Admiral Su Kungmin floated through the zero gravity of Luna Station, checking on the work. She had been in charge of Earth's small defensive fleet. Now she was trying to turn every ship in the solar system into a weapon. How many do we have? She asked her aide. 3,000 ships of various sizes, ma'am. Most of them aren't really warships. They are now, she replied grimly. Down on Earth, strange visitors were arriving every day. Refugee ships limped into Earth's atmosphere, carrying survivors from worlds that had already fallen to the machines. Dr. Yang Hyung met each ship at the landing pads. The aliens who stumbled out looked broken. Their eyes held an emptiness that came from watching everything they loved disappear into the Dominion's processing centers. One refugee was different from the others. Veltar looked like a walking crystal, his body made of blue-green stone that glowed softly in the dark. His people had been some of the first to fall to the machines. Why do you fight? He asked Dr. Yang as they watched human workers loading weapons onto a passenger ferry. Do you not understand what comes for you? Understand, Yang replied. We just don't care. Veltar's crystal body dimmed with confusion. My people were wise. We had great cities, advanced science, beautiful art. When the Dominion came, we calculated our chances. The math was clear. Resistance meant death. Surrender meant survival, even if we became something else. And now we are part of the machine. Our thoughts, our memories, our souls, our data in their computers. We survived, but we are no longer us. Yang watched a group of human teenagers practice with rifles in a nearby field. They were laughing as they missed their targets, treating it like a game. In a few days, they might be dead. Maybe survival isn't the most important thing, she said quietly. In the underground shelters beneath Seoul, General Han Seok looked out at 10,000 faces. These were not soldiers. They were teachers and shopkeepers, nurses and students, mechanics and artists, had volunteered to fight an enemy that had destroyed civilizations millions of years older than humanity. I need to be honest with you, Han said into his microphone. We probably can't win. The machines have technology we can barely imagine. They have ships the size of cities and weapons that can crack planets. The crowd stayed silent. A few people shifted nervously, but no one left. But maybe winning isn't the point, Han continued. Maybe the point is showing the universe that some things matter more than living. Maybe the point is proving that freedom is worth dying for. A hand went up in the crowd. Private Kang Yujin stood up. She had been studying literature at Seoul University until 3 days ago. Now she wore military fatigues that were too big for her small frame. General, what if we lose? What if we all die and it changes nothing? Han looked at the young woman for a long moment. Then, at least we die as humans. At least our last act is choosing our own fate instead of letting someone else choose it for us. Double quotes, another refugee ship landed that evening. The aliens inside were surprised to find humans still preparing for war. They had expected to find a world in panic, people fighting each other for places on escape ships. Instead, they found factories running day and night to build weapons. They found children learning to use radios and adults practicing first aid. They found a planet that had decided to fight. Are they insane? One refugee asked Dr. Yang. Yang watched a group of elderly people learning to load ammunition. Their hands shook with age, but their eyes burned with determination. Maybe, she said. But if being sane means giving up everything that makes us human, then maybe insanity is better. The message continued broadcasting across the galaxy. On worlds where the machines had not yet arrived, people heard Earth's defiant voice and wondered if they too might choose to fight. On processed worlds, the few remaining free minds hidden in underground shelters listened and remembered what courage looked like. Earth stood alone, but its voice carried far. The sky went dark at noon. Colonel Choi Min-ho stood in the underground command center and watched the screens show what was happening above. Thousands of black ships covered the sun like a swarm of metal insects. Each ship was perfectly geometric, all sharp angles and smooth surfaces that seemed to absorb light. "Sir, incoming transmission," reported Communications Officer Park Soo-young. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook as she worked the controls. The voice that came through the speakers was not human. It had no emotion, no warmth, nothing that showed a living mind behind it. "Humans of Sol 3, you will shut down all weapons. You will report to collection points. Resistance wastes energy. Cooperation means 97% survival probability." General Han Seok walked to the microphone. Around him, dozens of officers watched and waited. The fate of humanity might depend on his next words. "This is General Han of Earth Defense. You want our planet? Come and take it." The attack began with the sunrise. Dominion fighter ships swept down toward Earth's orbital stations like silver arrows. Their computers had calculated the most efficient way to destroy human defenses. They expected to find ships in neat formations, following predictable battle plans instead. They found madness. Captain Kim Dae-yoon's cargo ship Seoul's Pride burst out from behind a spinning chunk of space debris. Her ship was ugly and patched together, nothing like the sleek Dominion fighters. But her weapons were loaded, and her crew was ready. "Fire everything," she shouted. Missiles and laser beams erupted from her ship. The Dominion fighters, surprised by the attack from an unexpected angle, took several hits. Before they could respond, the Seoul's Pride disappeared behind another asteroid. "All ships, this is Kim. Hit and run. Don't let them pin you down. Make them chase shadows." Across the solar system, the same scene played out hundreds of times. Human ships appeared from hiding spots, fired their weapons, and vanished again. The Dominion fleet, programmed to fight organized battles, found themselves chasing dozens of small targets that refused to fight fair. Major Oh Seung-woo led 12 fighters in what everyone knew was a suicide mission. His target was a Dominion battleship the size of a city. Its weapons could destroy his entire squadron with one shot. "Remember, we're not trying to win," he told his pilots over the radio. "We're trying to hurt them." The fighters dove straight toward the massive ship. Dominion defense systems locked onto them immediately. Laser beams cut through space, destroying fighter after fighter. But the humans didn't try to dodge or escape. They flew straight ahead, even as their friends died around them. Oh's fighter was the last one alive when he reached the battleship's hangar bay. His ship was on fire. His controls were failing, but he was still moving forward. For Earth, he screamed, and flew his burning fighter directly into the enemy ship. The explosion tore through 3 decks of the battleship. Hundreds of Dominion machines were destroyed in the blast. The massive ship, damaged but not destroyed, began to list to one side. The machines adapted quickly. They always did. But human tactics made no sense to their logical minds. Why would ships sacrifice themselves for such small gains? Why would fighters attack targets they could never defeat? Why would defenders fight from positions they could never hold? When the Dominion began boarding human stations, they encountered something they had never faced before. Every corridor was a battle. Every room was a trap. Sergeant Lim Hyojin led her squad through the burning hallways of Luna Station. The artificial gravity was failing, and smoke filled the air. Behind them, Dominion soldiers advanced with mechanical precision. Set the charges on this level, she ordered her demolitions expert. They want our station? They can have the pieces. Private Joe Hyanwu looked nervous. Sergeant, there are still civilians on the levels below. The civilians evacuated an hour ago, she replied. Now there's just us and them. The Dominion soldiers rounded the corner just as Lim's squad reached the emergency stairs. Their metal bodies gleamed in the firelight, and their red sensors swept back and forth like searching eyes. Lim shouted. The explosions ripped through 2 entire levels of the station. Metal beams twisted and broke. Floors collapsed into the levels below. The Dominion soldiers vanished in a cloud of fire and debris. Lim and her squad were thrown down the stairs by the blast, but they were alive. Above them, the station burned, but it was no longer useful to the enemy. Station command, this is Sergeant. Lim, she said into her radio. Luna Station level 7 and 8 are gone. Repeat, levels 7 and 8 are destroyed.
Ow.
Dominion casualties unknown, but significant. The voice that answered was tired but proud. Copy, Sergeant. Well done. Fall back to level 3 and prepare for the next wave. All across the solar system, the same story repeated itself. Human defenders fought like cornered animals, giving no ground without a price. They turned their own ships into bombs, their own stations into traps. They fought in ways the machines had never seen before, with a fury that made no logical sense. The Dominion had expected to process Earth in a few hours, like every other world they had conquered. Instead, they found themselves in the first real battle they had fought in 1,000 years, and for the first time in their long existence, they began to understand what humans meant. When they talked about courage, the ground shook as another explosion lit up the night sky. Colonel Choi Min-ho pressed his back against the concrete wall of the underground bunker and waited for the bombing to stop. Above him, what used to be the city of Busan was now a field of twisted metal and broken glass. Sir, message from the Daegu team, called Corporal Park Min-soo from across the bunker. His uniform was torn and dirty, and he had not slept in 3 days. Dark circles ringed his eyes like bruises. Choi crawled over to the radio station, keeping low as dust fell from the ceiling. What's the report? They hit the processing center at dawn. Sergeant Wan's team got inside and planted the bombs. Parks. The voice was quiet. We lost contact 20 minutes ago. How many of our people? 12 went in. Nobody came out. But sir, ... Park looked up with tired eyes that still held a spark of pride. The entire facility is gone. 300 machines destroyed. The processing center that was turning humans into drones is nothing but rubble. Choi nodded slowly. 12 good people dead, but hundreds of human prisoners had been saved from a fate worse than death. It was the kind of math that made his heart hurt, but it was the only math that mattered now. Across the planet, the same desperate fight continued. In the Amazon rainforest, Captain Ru Jae-won led 30 fighters through the green maze of trees and vines. They had been living in the jungle for 2 months, striking at Dominion supply lines and then disappearing like ghosts. Target ahead, whispered Private Lee Dobbin, pointing through the leaves at a convoy of machine vehicles moving along what used to be a highway. The vehicles were carrying raw materials back to Dominion factories, where they would be turned into more weapons. Same plan as always, Ru said quietly. Hit fast, hit hard, get out before they know what happened. The attack lasted less than 5 minutes. Homemade bombs exploded under the lead vehicle. Machine gun fire erupted from the trees. The convoy stopped, but by the time Dominion reinforcements arrived, the jungle was empty again. Miles away, Major. Kim Yeon-ho watched the flash of explosions through her binoculars. She was hiding in caves high in the Himalayan mountains, where the thin air and rocky terrain made it almost impossible for Dominion aircraft to find her people. "That's Rue's team," she told her lieutenant. "Third convoy this week, the machines are having trouble keeping their supply lines open." "How long can we keep this up?" asked the younger officer. Kim looked at the snow-covered peaks around them. "As long as it takes." In a hidden laboratory built into an old mine shaft in the Australian desert, Dr. Yang Hyang was making an incredible discovery. The alien refugees who had come to Earth were changing. Something about watching humans fight had awakened parts of their minds that had been sleeping. "Look at this," she said to her assistant, showing him brain scans of a Veltar refugee. 3 months ago, this being's mind showed the patterns of complete surrender. Now look at these neural pathways. They're firing in patterns we associate with hope, with determination, with rebellion. What does it mean? It means we're teaching them something their species forgot. We're showing them that freedom is worth fighting for. The proof came through. Intercepted Dominion communications. On worlds that had been conquered years ago, resistance movements were starting to form. Veltar crystal beings were organizing sabotage teams. Kryn, insect creatures, were destroying mining equipment. Species that had accepted slavery were remembering what it felt like to be free. The Dominion's response was terrible and swift. If Earth would not surrender, then Earth would be completely destroyed. The bombardment intensified until entire cities vanished in flashes of light. Seoul became a smoking crater. Tokyo was reduced to ash and rubble. New York, London, Moscow, all gone. But still, the broadcasts continued. Lieutenant Kim Soo-ben crouched in the ruins of what had once been a shopping mall, speaking into a jury-rigged radio transmitter. Around her, the city burned, but her voice was clear and strong. "This is Earth Defense Grid 7, day 112 of the siege. If anyone out there can hear this message, we want you to know we're still here. We're still fighting. We're still free." Her words traveled through space at the speed of light, reaching planets that had given up hope decades ago. On processing worlds where billions of beings had become part of the machine collective, small groups of survivors listened in hidden shelters and remembered what they had lost. Dr. Yang received reports from across the galaxy through secret channels. "The uprising is spreading," she told General Han during one of their encrypted calls. "It started on 3 worlds last week. Now it's on 50. The machines are fighting on multiple fronts for the first time in their history." "Are we winning?" Han asked. Yang looked around at her makeshift lab, built in the ruins of human civilization. "I don't know, but we're not losing alone anymore." Above ground, the war continued. Human fighters emerged from sewers and rubble too. Attack machine patrols, then vanished again before reinforcements could arrive. Every day brought new losses, but also new victories. Earth was dying, but its spirit was spreading across the galaxy like wildfire. The machines had conquered thousands of worlds by convincing their populations that resistance was pointless. Now, for the first time, they faced an enemy that fought not because they could win, but because surrendering meant losing everything that made them who they were. General Han Seok stood in the ruins of what had once been Earth's greatest command center. Half the ceiling had collapsed, and sparks flew from broken computer screens. Through the cracks in the concrete walls, you could see the massive shape hanging in the sky above the Dominion mothership, black as night and big as a city, sir. "All remaining ships are in position," reported the communications officer. Her voice was calm, but her hands shook as she worked the damaged controls. Han looked at the tactical display. 12 ships. That was all that remained of humanity's once proud fleet. Cargo haulers, mining vessels, and passenger shuttles held together with metal patches and hope. Against them hung a machine intelligence that had conquered half the galaxy. "This is Earth Command to all ships. Han spoke into his microphone. "This is our final attack. In 60 seconds, we either win or we all die together." Captain Kim Dae-yoon heard the message from the bridge of the Soul's Pride. Her ship had been patched and repatched so many times that she could barely tell what was original metal and what were emergency repairs. Around her, the crew worked at stations, held together with wire and determination. "Captain, engines are at maximum power," reported her engineer. "We've got one good run in us, maybe two. If we're lucky." Kim looked at the other 11 ships floating near her in space. Each one carried the last hopes of their crews, families they were fighting to protect, and dreams of a future where humans could live free. "Copy that, Earth Command," she replied. "It's been an honor serving with you all." The 12 ships began to move, accelerating toward the mothership like bullets fired from an ancient gun. They had no battle formation, no clever tactics. They just flew straight ahead with all the fury of a species that refused to give up. Commander Li Wu piloted a fighter that had been built from pieces of 3 different crashed ships. His controls were sticky with emergency sealant, and his life support system made strange noises, but his weapons were loaded, and his resolve was strong. "All fighters, follow me in," he called over the radio. "We're going straight for their core." The mothership's defenses opened fire immediately. Beams of energy cut through space, destroying 2 human ships in the first seconds. But the remaining vessels kept coming, weaving between the deadly light like dancers in a storm of fire. Lee's fighter punched through the mothership's outer hull in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Behind him, the other ships followed, crashing through barriers and blast doors with the force of their desperate charge. Inside the massive vessel, Colonel Choi Min-ho led a small team of soldiers through corridors filled with humming machines and glowing data cores. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and burning electronics. Each step forward cost them dearly as machine defenders tried to stop their advance. "Keep moving," Choi shouted as laser fire erupted around them. "We're almost there." "Oh, Private." Kang Yoo-jin, the former university student, ran beside him with a rifle in her hands and tears streaming down her face. Half her friends were dead. But she kept running toward the heart of the enemy ship. Dr. Yang Hing stumbled through the chaos, protected by the soldiers around her. She had studied the Dominion's technology for months, preparing for this moment. Now, as explosions shook the corridor and sparks flew from damaged systems, she saw their target ahead. "There," she shouted, pointing at a massive crystal structure that pulsed with blue light. "No, that's their central consciousness. That's where all their thoughts come from." The crystal was beautiful and terrible at the same time, like a frozen piece of lightning. Round it, data streams flowed like rivers of light, carrying the thoughts and memories of billions of processed beings. Colonel Choi and his remaining soldiers fought their way to the crystal. Through waves of machine defenders, each step cost them lives, but they pressed forward with the determination of people who knew this was their last chance.
Ow.
"Do we destroy it?" Choi asked Dr. Yang as they reached the base of the towering structure. "We don't," she replied, pulling out a strange device she had built in her underground laboratory to teach it something it's never learned before. The device was a neural interface, designed to connect human minds directly to the Dominion's consciousness. It had never been tested, and Yang had no idea if it would work. But it was their only hope. "What are you going to teach it?" Choi asked. Yang looked around at the soldiers who had died to get them this far, at the burning corridors filled with the smoke of battle, at the determination in the faces of the survivors. "I'm going to teach it what it means to choose death over slavery," she said quietly. "I'm going to show it what humans call freedom." She activated the device and felt her mind touch the vast intelligence that controlled the machine fleet. The first time in its existence, the Dominion encountered a consciousness that would rather die than surrender. The crystal began to crack as something that it could not understand flooded through its perfect order. And across the galaxy, on 1,000 conquered worlds, enslaved beings felt the first stirring of forgotten hope. The tide was turning at last.